Very quickly, just a few minutes. If you haven't seen it, our petition for reconsideration of the FDA rule is posted on the website. Read it. It's very interesting. If you didn't know, we consulted with Dr. Mark Richardson. He's the guy that wrote the Canadian risk assessment. We paid him to come in and critique. Can you hear me? To come in and critique the FDA final rule. He did an excellent job, found very fundamental mistakes that they made. Among the mistakes was failing to standardize for children's weights. Just an absolutely marvelous job. He's so familiar with regulatory requirements that he pointed out several things they failed to take into account, including the increase in the uncertainty factors from 30 to 100, which drops the reference dose dramatically that FDA was relying on in making their pronouncements of safety. So take some time, look at that. Very interesting document. I was very proud when I woke up this morning. I padded over to my computer and saw posted on the Mercola website a statement by Jim Dickinson. He's the editor for FDA Web News. He said that the response to the July 28 FDA final rule is the most organized in FDA history. We're not helpless here. We've contributed very much to that very organized response. Thanks.
The question was, how do you keep it? What
Okay. Yeah, you have to...
1, 2.
Thanks.
Sometimes, let me continue.
Okay.
Sometimes, if you have a transapical sign, you diagnose it sometimes as a granuloma, but it is not a granuloma. It can be. It is a metalosis. This dark thing looks like a granuloma, but it is not every time a granuloma. It's a metalosis. And even for those cases, the chelator walks water. So that chelation today is very, very wrong. We use it in Switzerland. Switzerland is not Europe, but in a very short time we will use it in Europe too. Not that Switzerland is not Europe. We are separate. Next question.
I want to thank all of you for your wonderful presentations. It's been really amazing here the last couple of days. But this question is for you, Dr. Summers. I am very interested in an article that I read in the Price Pottinger newsletter that came out, and it said that our wonderful powers that be that have created GMO corn have made it so that the plant itself can generate its own pesticide, and that this information now is being picked up by the bacteria in our gut, and basically through the type of process you're talking about with plasmids. And once it's picked up by the bacteria in our gut, we are producing insecticides in our gut, and virtually they were saying, according to the article, that once that happens, you can't really possibly get rid of it. And I wondered what your opinion was on that, if you'd had a chance to see that article.
I haven't seen that article. In principle, that's possible, but I've certainly not seen any data that. Let me remind you that I don't do corn, okay? I do recombinant DNA occasionally, but it's for different purposes, so I haven't kept up with that area. But the original idea was to put a bacterial gene that would allow resistance to glyphosate, which is Roundup. Right. Okay, so it's a variant of a normal metabolic enzyme, and it's an aromatic biosynthesis someplace or another. Then plants have a variant that makes them sensitive to glyphosate, so you can kill all plants. And they either engineered this gene in vitro or they got it from a bacterium or something like that, and they put it into the plant genome. And so the plants that have it are now resistant to Roundup. Now, when you eat a plant, okay, the proteins in that plant are digested by you down to amino acids, okay? DNA sometimes gets through, but there's a huge amount of literature on the DNA in, the idea that you would eat a piece of DNA in corn, or, and that entire piece of DNA, long enough to encode a gene, would make it through your digestive tract and then be taken up by bacteria in your gut and transformed by a piece of loose DNA and become effective. The chances of that, as far as I know, are astronomically small, okay? And there have been experiments about how easy it is to get DNA out of plants and go through the GI tract. Yes, you can find pieces of DNA in there with a PCR chain reaction, okay? But you're not finding whole genes, and there's no evidence that you're actually finding them incorporated into plasma that's replicating in your gut flora. So I would say that as far as I know, that A, it hasn't happened, and B, it's vanishingly unlikely to happen.
Thank you.
Dr. Haley, this morning you were showing the ratio of reduced and oxidized glutathione as a measure of metabolic oxidative stress. But you also said total glutathione as a measure of oxidative stress. Is one better than the other? Is one easier to measure than the other? What would you do if you were looking for a quick clinical?
Well, the data we showed was done in a scientific research lab. You can't order it; be astronomically expensive. But in that data, what I didn't bring out in the talk because I was kind of rushed, is that the change was the decrease in the level of oxidized glutathione, not the total. So when you look at total glutathione levels, people that don't have enough cysteine just don't make it. And so the only thing you can do as a physician today is order a total blood glutathione, which is the reduced glutathione. It's not really total. Some places they will reduce it first, and that takes even the oxidized and the reduced. And so there is a weakness. It's something that we really have to work out. But right now, the commercial labs just don't offer the reduced over oxidized ratios. That's the best. There's no doubt about it.
And I have a question for Dr. Shade. We were talking today about the urinary level, and you used Moline, which I generally don't rely on, but somehow having a relevance to mercury levels. And I have made a graph here of the children's mercury poisoning study. Are you familiar with that? And at the end of the study, there was no statistical significant difference between the urinary mercury levels of the children that had up to 15 fillings versus the ones that were the controls. And I'd like you to comment on how that has any relevance, how urine would be a biomarker of anything.
Well, what you want to have is urine as well as blood in organic levels. No, that was a problem. If they had blood there, you would have seen that the boys, and it was the girls and the boys were different. The boys had this statistical non-difference from the non-amalgam crew, and the girls had a big difference. They went up and they stayed straight the whole way along. The boys went down. The girls stayed the same, the boys went down. If you had blood in both of them and you did speciation, you would see that the boys' blood and organic levels were going up and the girls were staying the same. So urine on its own, you don't know if you're getting a false negative by a low exposure. But if you have blood and organic and urine, then you're looking for a certain ratio between the two. And if your urine's low but your blood's high, it means your kidneys have been fried by this, which is obviously what happened to the boys.
Dr. Mullenix, give us some idea of what we can do to detox from fluoride.
You can't detox. It's not the same. What the treatment that you have to do is, remember, the fluoride may be completely gone from the system, and the problem will continue simply because it's like it kicked the trigger of that whole wave of homeostatic set point, and once it changed that homeostatic set point, you can pee it out. It can be, completely gone from the body. It can be in the bone, but it's already hit the receptor. It's already done the damage. And then the whole process of resetting that homeostatic set point is going to take weeks to months for it to be back into control. If you look at the blood levels, if you look at the urine levels, it's someone that's honest to God chronically fluoride poisoned. The urine levels will be low, will be non-existent. The blood levels not there. You can do bone biopsies, and the bone biopsies are practically worthless. And in fact, we don't even use it in litigation. Even if the guy offers to go in and have a bone biopsy and take it out and measure the levels, the chances of you being able to find it and have a level, are practically nil. So the first rule in the problem is stop the exposure. You're setting, if you drink chlorinated water, you're resetting your homeostatic set point. You are upping your notch, you're increasing your bone fluoride content, and you're going to react differently to an acute exposure at work. These individuals, day after day, will get hit. It's like they're going on, it's like a steroid high. And they will temporarily, and actually we have individuals where they get a mania, it's a real push, it's a stimulation. But then, because of the homeostatic mechanisms, it turns around and shuts everything down. And it can take weeks to months. So once it gets in there, once it hits receptors, it's out. And it can be. So detoxing, you're really just exposing yourself to the toxicity of some of the detox systems and drugs, which can be just as bad. So what you have to do and to treat this is you have to treat it by measuring the stress and what stage your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal cortex is in, and try and get the hormone levels back to normal. And that we are seeing it's taking years. And I've got one individual, for example, these guys are sick. Their exposure would have been stopped, and 7 years later, they're still having severe bouts and problems because, remember, as it is released from the bone, it comes back out into the blood and go and get another receptor. And so you've got, it's like they have spells, and yet the exposure has been stopped. So this business of detoxing and that kind of thing just doesn't fit in this situation. And every time those receptors are hit, it leaves its imprint on hormonal changes, which leaves its imprint on the bone. It's hormones that control the whole bone turnover and the metabolic bone disease. It's the hormones that controls the calcium and phosphate levels and so forth and so on. It's those you've got to get back as quickly as possible.
Marcia?
Yes, Dr. Mullenix, the natural non-fluoridated toothpaste, they don't add fluoride, but they have calcium carbonate, which is there fluoride in there bound to calcium as a natural ingredient from nature?
Natural fluoride, I assume you're meaning calcium fluoride.
Yes.
And it's funny, in the declassified documents, the military, they talk about the calcium fluoride as being, natural, and it's just as bad as, fluoride is fluoride. The only difference that it makes is it makes it a little more difficult to take it in and get it across by ingestion.
Right.
But if you take a rock of calcium fluoride, it's not likely to get through. But if you take that calcium fluoride and you crush it up into little bitty teeny particles, it's going to get across just the same. So this business of telling you, oh, well, natural fluoride is good,
Right.
calcium fluoride versus artificial, like hydrochlorosic acid or sodium fluoride or whatever, it's a different, slightly different dose response curve. It's the same thing.
So they should deem it.
It's in, so don't buy that business. And the military actually told the powers that be it's calcium fluoride, and I can tell you they did the lung pathology where animals actually inhaled calcium fluoride because they did the experiment with that because they thought, oh, it's going to be neutral, it won't do anything. It caused the same problem, and the same pathology. They call it chronic emphysema and obstructive lung disease. Same, that was calcium fluoride. That's surprising.
Dr. Molnex, I don't want to just pick on you, but it's the lowering of the IQ in the population that seems most dramatic to me. Could you talk about that and how diet might affect it? Are some countries more susceptible because of diet? And if you talk, one more thing, I know we use aluminum to clarify the water where I live, and then now we're putting fluoride in the water. Is that aluminum residue going to make the fluoride even more toxic?
I'm not sure I got everything.
The first question was there's been reported a 10-point IQ lowering in some communities compared to other communities, and I've seen 2 papers. That's dramatic and it's horrible, and I'd just like to wonder if diet in the country has more to do with that. Are certain diets higher in calcium safer for the children, or
I would always say that, calcium is an antidote to fluoride to a certain extent, in that it can reduce the amount of fluoride that's absorbed. But in terms of the IQ and the problems there, when I was doing experiments and what hit me in the laboratory was how similar fluoride was to radiation. And I had been brought up in the laboratory to use radiation as a tool to interfere with the cell progression and brain development. I mean, we use radiation to interrupt that whole cell development and brain development. Well, I found I put fluoride in, I did it with X-ray, and the changes in the behavior were exactly the same as if I used fluoride, just like I was using radiation. And so the problem is with the IQ and all of that is with children because of their critical period of brain development. I mean, you do not want, I repeat, you do not want fluoride exposure in children where they have reduced blood-brain barriers and they can let these things in. You do not want the brain to still be developing because fluoride is going to interfere with that natural cell progression and brain development and making all those connections that will lower IQ. I mean, it's the memory problems. I mean, I said that fluoride, you have to look at it as receptor disease, you have to look at it as an endocrine disease, and it's in glucocorticoid levels and the impact on memory are well demonstrated. And so, the big thing about IQ is you don't want fluoride to children. And brain development goes on clear up into teenage and young in years, because one of the last areas that's developing in the brain is the hippocampus and the interconnections there. And you know, and that's extremely important for memory. That's the hippocampus is the most susceptible to glucocorticoid stress. I mean, it's they track along the very same. So with your next question with fluoride and aluminum and water, the thing is, when we measured the amount, we weren't expecting to find aluminum at the levels that we were finding in those fluoride additives. I mean, in the salts, it was 3,000 to 4,000 parts per million of aluminum in the salts that they're being sent over here from China. That surprised all the water treatment operators. They had no idea that they were putting in a contaminant at those levels. The very metal...
I'm recording through the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. The very metal that fluoride, you know, for it to become biologically active, we're putting into the drinking water every day.